Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming tonight. Welcome to the Washington Center, and welcome to this Candidates Forum for the 10th Congressional District. We are looking forward to information received from our candidates, and we're also looking forward to information received through your questions. The forum tonight is sponsored by the League of Women Voters, and we're excited to say that we're also co-sponsoring with the Nisqually tribe, so that's an extra special event for us. If you're familiar with our League forums, we always remind folks that the League is open to everyone of voting age. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan political organization, and we are open to everyone of voting age for membership, so I hope you'll all give strong consideration to joining. Let me see a show of hands of how many folks we have out there who are Leaguers. Raise your hands high. Okay, Leaguers, look at all those folks who don't have their hands up, so why don't you make a note of that and zero in on them before you leave tonight. Okay, so with each forum, we work really hard to ensure that everybody has an opportunity who's an eligible voter to have as much information and to fully inform their voting processes as possible, and tonight is certainly no exception. So let me take this time to please welcome, and you welcome us as well, Allison Brooks, who is our League Vice President. Allison is going to introduce the key players tonight for this evening's event and the entire forum process. So please welcome Allison Brooks.
Hello and good evening. Again, my name is Allison Brooks. I'm Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Thurston County, and I'd like to welcome our candidates as well as our moderator. And with us tonight is Denny Heck, the incumbent candidate for the 10th Congressional District, and Joyce McDonald. And thank you so much, both of you, for being here. I always give major kudos to people who run for elected office. It's a hard thing to do. So thank you to both of you for taking up this challenge. Can we give them a round of applause for running? I think it's great. It's a hard role to take on, so I really admire both of you. And I'd also like to introduce tonight our moderator, Chairwoman Cynthia Aiel of the Nisqually Indian Tribe. We're really excited because this is our first major program that the League of Women Voters of Thurston County has done together with the Nisqually Indian Tribe. So this is an exciting evening for us. Chairwoman Aiel has been the chairwoman of the Nisqually Indian Tribe for quite some time, and I don't know how long. How long has it been, Cynthia?
Since 2006.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
So the League of Women Voters, we do promote civility. So we are going to ask you tonight, if you hear something from one of the candidates that you really like, please don't cheer, because we are filming this for TCTV. So just think in your mind, yay! But please don't say it out loud. And if you hear something from a candidate that you don't like, you can say in your mind, oh, I didn't like that. But please don't say it out loud. So we are asking you to, just no cheering, no applause, because we want the people who watch us on TCTV not to get distracted. So just, cheer in your minds or say whatever you want in your mind. So thank you up front for being civil. And I wanted to go over the process. So this evening we'll start with our two candidates. Each candidate will get 2 minutes for an opening statement. And then the first candidate who will receive the first question gets 2 minutes. The next candidate gets a minute to respond. That candidate then gets the next question for 2 minutes. The other candidate gets a minute to respond, and it will go back and forth like that. And then both candidates will have 1 minute each for closing statements. After that, we will go into questions from the audience. I've seen a lot of questions already. Hopefully we'll get through them all. We may not have time, but we'll try. And each candidate will get 1 minute each to answer the questions we get from the audience. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our moderator, Chairwoman Cynthia Aiel.
Thank you so much, Allison. Very much appreciate appreciate this opportunity to come and moderate for this evening. Good evening to both candidates, Denny, and to Joyce as well. So let's go ahead and get started. As Allison said, we're going to have an opening statement from each of you, beginning with Joyce, and you'll have 2 minutes each. So Joyce, when you're ready.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm Joyce McDonald, and I'm hoping to be your Congresswoman from the 10th District. I have served 10 years in the Washington State House of Representatives, last 4 years actually, as Capital Budget Chairman. And I also have served 6 years in the Pierce County Council, last 2 as chair. I am a very passionate, naturalized American. I immigrated to this country some years ago when I married my husband, an American sailor. I know a lot of people don't think it's a great thing to marry a sailor. Personally, it was one of the best things I ever did because it allowed me to come to the United States. I am a former foster parent and parent aide with Children's Home Society, former PTA president, youth center president, softball coach, soccer coach, all of those great things that parents do. And probably one of the things that most people don't know about me is that I was very fortunate to be a very effective legislator when I was in Olympia here serving in the Capitol. And I actually passed the first bill in the nation to prohibit text messaging while driving. And after I passed that bill, a movement swept across our country and just took root everywhere. And after that, everyone was prohibiting text messaging while driving. For me, that's why I do what I do. I like to see young people's lives changed and old people's lives saved. So thank you for allowing us to be here tonight, and I look forward to this time with you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Denny?
Well, thank you, Cynthia, and my thanks to the Nisqually Indian Tribe and to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event this evening. It's a great honor to be a part of it, and I thank Joyce as well for being part of this exercise in democracy with all of us. Most importantly, I thank all of you for pulling yourself away from the Seahawk game this evening. Nearly 2 years ago, you gave me your trust by electing me to represent you in our state's brand new congressional district. And with that trust came my duty to work day in and day out on behalf of the people in this community. This is the same commitment made between every elected official and the people they represent, but one that is frankly not always honored. With Congress's approval rating stuck at about 16%, it's clear that far too often promises made between politicians and their bosses, the public, are broken. So first, let me thank you for entrusting me to fulfill my end of the bargain. It's not a duty I take lightly. As your congressman for the past 2 years, I've had the chance to meet with and hear from lots of hardworking men and women from the South Sound. Most of the time, I don't know whether they're Democrats or Republicans or independents, and to tell you the truth, I frankly don't care. Here's what I do care about: making sure that everyone in our state has the opportunity to dream big, make a decent wage with a secure retirement, and enough to provide and support their family. That's the middle class tradition, and it's what I was blessed to grow up with here in Washington. But every person sitting here knows that the opportunities available to people who are willing to work hard are frankly diminishing, which is why for the past 2 years I've pushed for legislation that protects the middle class and those working to get into it. I'm looking forward to sharing with you over the next couple of hours or 90 minutes some of the work I've done in the past 18 months on your behalf, as well as listening to your questions about what you think we ought to do going forward. Thank you very much for being here.
All right, thank you, candidates. We're ready to begin our questions. We have 11 questions this evening that we're going to go over. And Joyce, you'll be answering the first question. You'll have 2 minutes to do so. And the question is, the revenue disparity between rich and poor increases annually and has done so since the early 2000s. Is this on your list of priorities, and what do you propose to do about it? If not, why not?
Well, the very, very best way, in my opinion, to increase the livability for families in Washington State and in the 10th District is to ensure that they have a good job. And jobs, of course, as you know, are created in the private sector. And small business entrepreneurs have historically led our country in the creation of good family wage jobs. So when I go back to Washington, D.C., I'm going to do everything I can to promote things that are good for the people back home, to create jobs, to ensure that the regulatory burden is not too onerous so that they cannot continue to create those jobs. I owned a small business for 10 years, and in that business, just from my work in that family, in my family's work and risk, we created 16 jobs. And I was very, very happy because those people, although they only, most of the servers, it was a restaurant, were only receiving minimum wage at the base level. When they went home with their tips, they were earning an average of $22 and $23 an hour. So for me, every opportunity that we have for people in our community to create good jobs and jobs that will allow people to get education and experience to rise up into a better paying job is something that I just encourage it. I honor it, and I feel that people deserve the opportunities that we can provide at government level. Thank you.
All right, Denny, would you like for me to repeat the question?
Please.
All right, and you'll have 1 minute to respond. The revenue disparity between rich and poor increases annually and has done so since the early 2000s. Is this on your list of priorities, and what do you propose to do about it? If not, why not?
It's on my list of priorities, very near the top, and it ought to be on the list of everybody's priorities sitting in this room. Income inequality and net worth inequality in this nation is as high as it's been since the late 1920s, and we all know what happened thereafter. There are a couple of things I would do right away. I'm proud to stand before you and tell you I'm a co-sponsor of H.R. 1010, which would increase the federal minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is only $7.25 an hour. My fundamental belief, my foundational belief, is that anybody who gets up and works hard every single day ought not to have to live in poverty. But $7.25 an hour are poverty wages. Here's what's real. People often say, well, that's just the teenagers. That's not true. 88%, you're hearing that number correctly, 88% of the beneficiaries for an increased minimum wage are not teenagers. 2/3 of them are women. So the first thing we ought to do is increase the minimum wage. If we had, I'll talk more about it later, thank you.
All right, on to our next question, and Denny, we're going to begin with you. You'll have 2 minutes to respond. Do you support strong federal legislation to reduce carbon emissions? And if so, what actions would you like to see taken? If not, why not?
Yes, I do. The science is in, the debate is over, let's get on with the action. It is that straightforward. Frankly, I'm having a difficult time being terribly patient with people who want to argue over what 1% to 3% of the scientists conclude when the other 97% say this issue's done. We are emitting too much carbon into our atmosphere, and we are experiencing climate change, and it will be materially harmful to the economies of the world. That's what the fact is. It threatens us greatly. Now, the truth is you don't have to think esoteric or global to understand the damage that's being done. Right here in the South Puget Sound, shellfish farmers are reporting that as a result of increased acidification in the water, the larvae of shellfish are unable to form the hard shell, and they have to go elsewhere to grow the seeds where acidification hasn't quite reached that level. It's harming the economy of the South Puget Sound already. Now, there's a lot of debate about which is the best way to do this. Cap and trade, carbon tax, and there are other ideas. Frankly, I think that's less important than just getting on with it. I also am having a hard time being terribly patient with people who want to argue over the exact best way to do this when, in fact, we're not doing anything. Let's do something. Frankly, the future of this planet depends upon it, the vitality and health of the economies of the nations throughout the world. and it is time for us to take action and reduce carbon emissions into the atmosphere, which is warming the planet, which is causing the melting of the polar caps, which is raising the sea level, which is causing economic and financial damage throughout the planet, and is only going to get worse. We have a problem. It's time to deal with it.
All right, thank you, Denny. Joyce, you're going to have 1 minute. Do you support strong federal legislation to reduce carbon emissions? And if so, what actions would you like to see taken? If not, why not?
I do support moving in the direction to reduce carbon emissions, but I don't necessarily agree with what Denny says, that just do something, because sometimes that's what government does. It just does something, and that something is the wrong thing. And what we lose in that wrong decision of government has a devastating effect, sometimes on jobs and families. Now, I'm not a scientist, but I know that the United States is one of the most environmentally conscious countries in the world, and I think that's a good thing for us to be. We need to lead, and I agree with that. We care about clean air and clean water, and our schools and our governments actively educate every day. We need to reduce carbon emissions through new energy transportation, recycling, new electronics, new water usage, other things. At the Pierce County Council, we supported the Clean Air Agency and had huge improvements in Pierce County. So we need to continue to promote common sense legislation that gets the job done over time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joyce. Okay, our next question. Joyce, you have 2 minutes for this. The National Railroad Administration is responsible for regulating the railroad industry. Do you think enough is being done to ensure the safety of fossil fuel transport? If not, what further regulations would you propose? If you do not, on what basis?
Yeah. Well, this is definitely not an area of expertise for me, but I do believe that we should be doing more to protect our environment as these trains are going through our communities. Part of the problems are that they come too often, and they're too long, and they block traffic, causing problems with the economy. But another secondary issue is that they actually could hamper some of our EMS services, our hospital transportation, things that are life-saving and life-endangering. So it's important that we look at all of these things, and we have our public organizations and agencies involved in determining what kind of regulations matter for us at the local level, because it is at the local level where we are affected. The other thing is environmentally, I think it's very important if you're talking about coal trains or other things like that. We need to be able to balance, as I say, the need for these things to get to the ports with the safety of the community. And if there are no ways to make it safe, then they shouldn't be traveling through our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. All right, Denny, you're going to have 1 minute to respond, and I'll read this again. The National Railroad Administration is responsible for regulating the railroad industry. Do you think enough is being done to ensure the safety of fossil fuel transport? If not, what further regulations would you propose? If you do not, on what basis?
No, I don't think enough is being done, and I've communicated that just exactly to the National Railroad Administration. To begin with, it's time that we got those outdated cars off the track, the T111s, I think they're called, which are not safe enough to transport the Bakken oil from the Midwest out here. They simply are not. We are far past the time where we improved the structural safety of the cars in which that material is transported. But that's not enough. We need to combine it with increased track inspections, brake inspections, new speed requirements. We also need to have an assurance that there are emergency response plans in place and that we have provided the resource to local first responders to be able to deal with the circumstance should it arise. And lastly, there's no amount of transparency here that would be too much. We need to make sure local communities are aware when this material is being transported through our neighborhoods.
All right, thank you, Denny. On to our next question. Denny, you're going to respond first. You'll have 2 minutes. Would you vote to pass an immigration bill that gives an avenue to citizenship to aliens currently in this country illegally? Why or why not? If not, what would you propose their status should be?
I'm a co-sponsor of, I think it's H.R. 15, which would enact comprehensive immigration reform. I wish that the House would take up the Senate-passed version of the bill, which passed overwhelmingly. The House of Representatives probably has 300 votes to deal with this out of 435, but we cannot force the vote from the majority, unfortunately. I think there isn't a soul sitting in this auditorium this evening who does not believe that the immigration system is anything but broken. It is broken. It's a problem that cries out for solution. And any solution, in order to be durable, will include 3 elements. First, securing our borders. Every nation has a right to secure its borders. Secondly, an employer verification system, because the truth is, if you don't have that mechanism, you're not going to be able to identify and locate people who are here without documents. And the third part is dealing with the approximately 11 million people who are here without documents. Now look, I've spent the last better part of the decade in the private sector, and when we go to work every day, we look for practical, problem-solving solutions. Here's the fact. If you took every person that was here without documents and loaded them on a bus and created a bus caravan bumper to bumper with those 11 million people, it would extend from San Diego to Anchorage, Alaska. So the idea that we're going to round up and export them is not a practical, common-sense solution. Instead, I think they do need to have available to them an earned pathway to continued residency and citizenship, an earned pathway in which they've paid some fines, they've learned English, they've come out from the shadows, and they've contributed more openly in our society. But here's a good reason to be for comprehensive immigration reform that often isn't discussed at forums like this. And I think it's a very good reason to be in favor of it. You realize that passage of comprehensive immigration reform will grow our economy faster? That's the truth. That's what the Congressional Budget Office concluded when they analyzed, I think it was the Senate-passed version. We need to grow our economy faster, and we need to enact comprehensive immigration reform.
All right, thank you, Denny. Joyce, you'll have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you.
Would you vote to pass an immigration bill that gives an avenue to citizenship to aliens currently in this country illegally? Why or why not? If not, what would you propose their status be?
I would not pass a comprehensive reform immigration bill that would allow people to receive amnesty for coming to this country illegally. We need to address the root problem and reform our legal immigration system so that those who want to come here the right way can do so in a respectable and fair process in a reasonable time frame. But we cannot continue to turn a blind eye and reward illegal immigrants who continue to disregard the laws of the United States, while at the same time we're punishing those who apply the right way. And they have waited patiently for years and years to come to the United States. The federal government has continuously failed to do its job. They have not secured the border. They have not instituted E-Verify. When I was on the Pierce County Council, I voted to enforce E-Verify, and Pierce County has it on the books right now. And unfortunately, the border states and the governors are struggling to pick up the pieces due to the failure to enforce our existing law. I'm committed to fixing that broken system and finding meaningful and fair reform for all.
All right, thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
And we're on to our next question. Joyce, you're going to respond with 2 minutes. To what level do you think the U.S. should intervene in the world's political hotspots?
That's a very tough question. I don't think it's the job of the United States to be the police officer for the world. With that being said, I know that all of you that are here tonight are probably very concerned when you see the suffering of people in other countries around the world who are being mutilated and killed, the innocents that are being mutilated and killed. and it's not an easy answer. Currently, I do support the President's policy for trying to recruit others around the world to intervene in certain issues. But the reality is we should be able to support the governments so that they can be strong enough to protect their own people. And the mission of the United States military is to protect the interests of the United States at home and abroad. And I think in the past we've spent too much time focusing on abroad. Hopefully in the future we will be a little wiser and at the same time be able to help other countries where their people are struggling and suffering. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joyce. Denny, 1 minute for this question. To what level do you think the U.S. should intervene in the world's political hotspots?
Well, I think it depends entirely on the hotspot and what the circumstances are. Let me just share with you what the criteria I use and apply whenever this question comes up. If we're speaking about military intervention, as I assume you are, my first screen is does America have a legitimate national security interest at stake? Or alternatively, is there a transcendent humanitarian consideration? Secondly, have we exhausted all diplomatic means to resolution of it? Thirdly, do we have a clear plan and a definition of success for our operation? And fourthly, do we have an exit strategy? Absent those things, I'm highly uncomfortable with intervention of any kind. But again, it is a question of what the exact circumstance is and what the context is. And these are the criteria that I would apply to any decision making.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, on to our next question. And Joyce, you will start with 2 minutes to respond. The physical
I think I just did that.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I'm okay on that, but I think it's my turn.
Oh, Denny. All right, you're next. 2 minutes. The physical infrastructure of this country in terms of its roads, bridges, and highways is rapidly deteriorating. What do you think the federal government should do to better this situation?
The American Society of Civil Engineers has basically given America a failing grade for the state of its infrastructure. Let's make sure we're expansive enough in our definition of that, however. It's not just roads and bridges, although it is certainly that. It's also water systems, sewer systems, stormwater runoff systems, mass transit systems, and the like. I think we have blown a great opportunity in the last 5 years. Bids for these projects were way down. Unemployment among the skilled trades was way up. The cost of money was virtually free, meaning interest rates were near zero. We should have been getting our act together and doing this. As it turns out, this coming May, the Federal Highway Safety, or the Federal Highway Highway Trust Fund, will expire. And so Congress will have an opportunity in the spring to step up to this. And it's past time they did that. It's past time that we adopt something that's a little bit more durable. Again, like comprehensive immigration reform, the best argument for investing in infrastructure is that it enables us to grow our economy faster. I've been very involved in the effort to advocate for completion of State Road 167, which stops in Puyallup, 5 miles short of the Port of Tacoma. That's been sitting there for 30 years. An independent assessment indicate that completion of that road would create over the next 10 to 15 years something like 79,000 jobs. Not the jobs associated with building it, but permanent jobs. South Sound could use those jobs, as a matter of fact. I didn't see what you raised up. I'm not, okay, thank you. Now I had 5 seconds, please. Investment in infrastructure is one of the most powerful things we can do to grow our gross domestic product faster. And the truth of the matter is we're projected to grow at an anemic 2.2 to 2.4. Don't believe last quarter. The average is 2.2 to 2.4. And the reality is that's not fast enough to absorb high school graduates and college graduates. We need to grow the economy faster. Increased investment in infrastructure is a very good way to do that.
Great, thank you, Denny. Joyce, 1 minute for you. The physical infrastructure of this country in terms of its roads, bridges, and highways is rapidly deteriorating. What do you think the federal government should do to better this situation?
Well, I think it definitely should be passing and as soon as possible, not waiting till March until the actual funding runs out. They should be planning now. They should be back there now working on it. But unfortunately, they're off until after the election. And we need to be sure that our federal government takes that responsibility seriously and gets the money back down to the local level. I served on the Puget Sound Regional Council, and that was the regional body that was responsible for receiving the federal grants and sending them out to the local communities based on need, freight mobility, jobs, and safety. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to support a robust transportation budget, and at the same time couldn't go by without addressing Highway 167, which has been in my district for 16 years. While I was in Olympia, we worked very hard in tough times and provided 70% of the right-of-way funding so that that right-of-way could be purchased, so that now the federal government can come in with the state and we can finish that project.
Great, thank you, Joyce. And the next question you have again for 2 minutes. The amount of money in politics appears to skew the democratic process in a negative way. Do you think that this is important? And if so, what would you do about it? If not, why not?
I think it is very important. And the reason I think it's very important is because I don't think that the American people could ever or should ever feel like someone is buying an election. The reality is special interests play too great a part in funding campaigns. We have a perfect example standing before you today. And unfortunately, the power of incumbency at the national level is overwhelming, which is why we have people serving in the US Congress who are in their 80s and older. And I love people in their 80s, but at the same time, we need to be able to be real and take a good look at why we are voting for the candidates we're voting for. Is it simply because we saw their name on a sign on a corner outside? Or is it because you really understand the philosophy and the foundation that they're coming from? So the best you can do is read your voter's pamphlet and get to know that person a little better, or call them up on the telephone and ask them where they stand on issues, or do what you're doing tonight and get out to more forums. I think that there should be a closer look at how campaigns are funded. I don't think they should be publicly funded, because I don't think it's the taxpayer's responsibility to fund my campaign. But I do think that there should be more limits placed on who and what can contribute to and how much can be contributed to any election. Thank you.
All right.
I got it.
Thank you.
There's way too much money in politics. Let me be clear what my premises are. Money isn't speech, and corporations aren't people. And Supreme Court decisions to the contrary, that's wrong-headed and ill-serves America's great heritage of democracy. That is why I am a proud co-sponsor of a constitutional amendment to just flat overturn Citizens United, because it was a bad decision. It's also why I am a co-sponsor of the By the People Act, which would set up a voluntary system of funding by donations to candidates, public funding through voluntary donations. It's also why I'm a co-sponsor of the Disclose Act, because the truth of the matter is today, especially with respect to independent expenditures, you don't always know where that money comes from. That's wrong. Money isn't speech, and corporations are not people.
Great. Thank you so much, Denny. All right, our next question, Denny, you're going to start with 2 minutes. Our care of our wounded veterans and those who return from duty and are unable to find jobs has become a matter of national concern. Do you think that this is a matter of funding, oversight, or politics? What would you propose to provide vets with the support that they need?
I don't think it's a matter of national concern at all. I think it's a national scandal what has happened to the treatment of our wounded warriors. The President signed in August comprehensive reform of the Veterans Administration, It was a tiny bright spot on an otherwise pretty abysmal record of the 113th session of Congress. It does provide more resources, and Congress is culpable in past years for not providing more resources. It also provides for increased accountability so that we can deal with people who perform such acts as those were alleged in Phoenix, Arizona, when records were falsified. I personally called for a criminal investigation into that matter because I think it warrants it. If somebody's health or life was put at risk because of fraudulent record keeping, then I think there ought to be a criminal investigation. It also provides increased flexibility by enabling the referral of healthcare patients who are veterans to outside resources when the system itself is not able to get to them in a timely manner. Now, having said all that, let's be real honest about this. This has not gone well. What's happened is, I think, a national scandal. The Veterans Facility at American Lake is one I visited often. I talk with these people. I wear on my wrist this band for Luke Sifka, an Olympia High School graduate who is a courageous young man, lost both his legs in Afghanistan through a bizarre coincidence the same day I was in Afghanistan, although I obviously didn't know it at the time. None of this will come to good, the passage of this good legislation, unless there is robust and muscular oversight on the part of Congress. Because the truth is, without implementation, there is no policy. This needs to be implemented. It needs to be implemented right, and it's the responsibility of Congress to make sure that it gets implemented right.
Thank you, Denny. Joyce, would you like me to repeat that?
Please.
All right, then you'll have 1 minute.
I think it was a little different than where we are now.
Okay. Our care of our wounded veterans and those who return from duty and are unable to find jobs has become a matter of national concern. Do you think that is a matter of funding, oversight, or politics? What would you propose to provide the vets with the support that they need?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's a matter of oversight. And I think that's what happens when you get too much going on at the federal government level, where people are managing huge bureaucracies and forgetting the service level that they're supposed to be paying attention to. So the reality is that, and this is not a partisan issue, as Denny said, we all care so much about our wounded warriors. And when they're well, we care about the fact that they need to be able to get good jobs. So they come out of the military with some wonderful skills. And so to get these people educated enough to become entrepreneurs and create their own jobs so that they might get excited and start their own businesses and create jobs for other vets, we need to be sure that the capital is available to undergird their expertise. And numerous studies show that when veterans start businesses, they actually succeed at a greater rate than the average population. So that's what I would do.
All right, thank you, Joyce. And you'll lead with the next question. What are your suggestions for enhancing an atmosphere of cooperation, compromise, and goodwill among congressional legislators?
Well, Cynthia, I appreciate the word that you used in there, which was goodwill. Because everywhere I have served, whether it was with Republicans or Democrats, there were always people of goodwill who determined that it was more important to put the well-being of the people of the United States, of the state, and of the county before their own ego. And there are people like that everywhere. I was very fortunate to be named Legislator of the Year by the State Council of Police and Sheriffs twice, and also the Business Examiner's Woman of Influence. But it wasn't because I was special or I was great. It was because I had worked with other people in the legislature to pass bills and to get things done that were important to all of us. I've done the same at Pierce County by being the creator of the Flood Control Zone District and working with the executive to make sure that the people in Pierce County and all of the jobs down the Puyallup River, all the way down to the Port of Tacoma, are protected. And that's another good reason for me to go back to Washington, D.C., because I'm working with the Army Corps of Engineers right now to ensure that the funding is there to undergird and rebuild and put some setback levees on that river so that we can protect those jobs. I think it's important that we all take a step back and realize that we're all Americans first. We all have children. Well, we don't all have children, but we have children we love. And some of us have grandchildren. We have neighbors. And I don't remember when I was a foster parent or PTA president or youth center president that I ever asked anyone, what party do you belong to? Because most people don't belong to any party. They're just people who care about other people. That's what we should do no matter where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Denny, do you need me to repeat that one?
Please.
All right. What are your suggestions for enhancing an atmosphere of cooperation, compromise, and goodwill among congressional legislators?
Thank you, Cynthia. Every individual member of the United States Congress really only has control over their own behavior. And in that regard, while I wish I had a magic wand that I could wave over Congress and make it functional again, I don't. But I do have control over my own comportment. And I have two golden rules that I aspire to. I'm not perfect. I'm not sure I live up to them 100% of the time, but I'm sure I always try to. And these two golden rules are always look for common ground and always be civil. There's really no excuse for bad manners and the kinds of personalization and demonization that go on. This is the approach I've taken in my first 2 years. I'd like to think it's why I was, I believe, the second freshman in the minority in 25 years to pass major legislation, because I teamed up with my friend Mike Fitzpatrick, a Republican from Pennsylvania, to significantly reform the reverse mortgage market, working with him, not caring who got credit, but reaching across the aisle and focusing on the issue and the problem to be solved.
All right. Thank you very much. Denny, you're going to lead the next question, so you have 2 minutes. Do you think it is important to reinstate Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which gives federal oversight power over states' voting laws? If not, why not?
Boy, is it ever. Yes, and I'm a co-sponsor of an updated Voting Rights Act, which doesn't quite do all of that. But here is yet another, I believe, wrong-headed Supreme Court decision. It invalidated Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which found that states and municipalities who had a history of voter discrimination would have to submit to the Department of Justice any changes prior to implementing them. Look, there's nothing more sacred. There's nothing more sacred than the right to vote. It makes us shareholders in this democracy. And the truth is, out of the hundreds of millions of votes that have been cast, the incidence of fraud or abuse is so small as to not hardly be measurable. Why don't we spend as much time and as much effort doing what we can to removing barriers to participation? You know, other countries do this better than we do. They have voting on Sundays. Some of them have mandatory holidays so that people can vote. The fact of the matter is we ought to be expending our energy on encouraging increased turnout. We're all shareholders of this great democracy. And we ought not to be putting up obstacles in the way that are artifices that don't have much to do with any underlying malice or sin or for that matter, conspiracy. Yes, the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was wrong, and we should enact an updated Voting Rights Act. It is a bipartisan bill, which is co-sponsored by Mr. Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin, I believe, and a personal hero of mine, John Lewis. He was on the bridge, got his head bashed in. He walks the talk. And if John Lewis can come together with a member of the majority Republican Party to introduce a bill, then the United States House of Representatives ought to pass it.
Thank you, Denny. Joyce, you have 1 minute. Would you like me to repeat?
Yes.
Do you think it is important to reinstate Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which gives federal oversight power over states' voting laws? If not, why not?
Well, I would not like to second guess at this point the United States Supreme Court when I don't have the information to determine why they made those decisions. I would prefer that states have the rights to oversee their own voting systems. I believe that government that's controlled closer to the people is better, more effective, and more efficient government. That being said, this is definitely not an area where I have looked into and examined the Supreme Court decision. So at this time, I would like to just leave that until I find out more about it. Thank you.
All right. We're on our last question. And Joyce, you're going to lead with 2 minutes.
Okay.
Fast track gives authority for the president to get an up or down vote on a trade agreement from Congress with no possibility of amendment or public input. Please tell us how you would vote on the question of fast track and whether you would add your name to the list of representatives opposing it. If you favor fast track, why?
I would not favor fast track. Fast track trade agreements usually are, in my opinion, agreements that hadn't had the scrutiny that they need to have. I think it's the responsibility of Congress to look out for the rights and the best interests of the people of the United States. And I believe it would almost be a dereliction of duty for Congress not to take the time to look at any trade agreements and determine whether or not those are in the best interests of the American people and the American workers in particular. So at this time, I would oppose fast-tracking the trade agreements.
Well, the good news is to the asker of the question that the so-called Trade Promotion Authority, that's the technical term for fast track, is been deemed dead. Senator Reid has said it's dead. We're not going to vote on it. It's a moot point. With respect to the bill that was introduced, presumably at the behest of the administration, I have some concerns about it. But like a lot of things, this isn't as black and white as people would seem, because you have to ask yourself, what is fast track authority legislation? It's a way for Congress to send instructions to the people negotiating it. So I would say, in part, it would depend on how it was worded. The bill we had before us, deep reservations, but it's dead. The broader issue is where we're going on the other 3 trade agreements that are being negotiated, both with respect to the Pacific and with respect to the European Union and with respect to services. And perhaps when we get to questions later from the audience, we'll have an opportunity to get into that subject in greater depth.
Great, thank you. All right, you each get an opportunity to make your closing statements, and we're going to start with Denny, and you have 1 minute.
Well, thank you, Cynthia, and again, Nisqually Tribe, as well as the League of Women Voters for once again sponsoring this great event. The only thing I want to say is that if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, and it has been a privilege and honor beyond measure, I cannot exaggerate to you the privilege and honor it is to represent the 672,455 people of the new 10th Congressional District, but who's counting? It has been. I pledge to you to take the same kind of hard work, common sense, problem solving, don't care what political party you're in if you want to solve a problem with me, approach to the job if I am fortunate enough to be reelected. I also know that the most important thing I can say here tonight, in addition to thanking you for your attendance, is I want your vote. I'm asking you to please favorably consider supporting me in this election. Thank you so very much for being here.
All right, thank you, Denny. Joyce?
Thank you, and I'm very pleased to have been here today. And I believe the strength of America lies with its people. And as a passionate, naturalized American, I value our government of the people. I'm no longer a subject of the Queen, but I'm a fully participating citizen of these United States. For that, I say thank you. I will keep our promises made to our veterans, and I'll maintain a strong national defense. I'll protect Social Security and Medicare for our seniors who worked hard and paid taxes all their lives. I'll promote jobs and common sense fiscal solutions for a balanced budget. We must reduce the federal debt. $17 trillion and counting is too much to mortgage our children's future. It's not right. I'm dedicated to open, honest government, and I'll work hard to keep government accountable with your tax dollars. I take that role and honor very seriously. And I would too ask for your vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman Heck, and thank you so much, Joyce McDonald.
Thank you.
Allison? Okay.
Okay, now's the really hard part. It's questions from the audience. And first of all, I know you held in your applause and all your thoughts, but could we do a round of applause for our candidates and our moderator? Thank you. And one more just for our great moderator, because she did a wonderful job. Thank you, Chairman Aiel. Okay, we have a lot of questions here, and some of them are very long. So if I summarize your questions, please have patience with me. But the first one is a perfect question for Monday Night Football, and you each get 1 minute. And Denny, looks like you can't decide who should go first.
I think that's your decision.
Okay, well, why don't we start with, does one of you have an urge to go first? I'll let you choose between the two.
I have an urge to inform everybody that the Seahawks are now up 24-10.
All right.
That's a good thing.
With that, I'll give the first question to Joyce. So Joyce, here's the first question from the audience. It's perfect for today. Should the Washington Redskins be compelled to change their name or face congressional censure?
Interesting. I would say no, because I believe that public pressure should do the job for them. And if people are concerned about that, they should make their views known to the Washington Redskins. And the market tends to work quite well in those cases. I don't believe it's the role of government.
Denny, should I repeat the question, or do you have it?
Yes, please.
Should the Washington Redskins be compelled to change their name or face congressional censure?
Yes. Nobody has a right to engage in a racial slur. That's not a matter of business practice. It's deeply, deeply offensive to the first people of this nation. Why would they insist upon retaining that name? It's far past time that that name be changed.
Okay. So next question. Jenny, you can start with 1 minute, and then we'll go back to Joyce. This question comes from someone who says, I'm really concerned about the effect of what I've heard about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. How can you work to protect our local environmental protections and local jobs?
Well, I think you touched upon two of the important three criteria that I will be applying to any proposal in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is kind of a big deal. This is a proposal to enter into a trade agreement with 11 other nations whose aggregated economies constitute 40% of the world's total. And it is fraught with both danger and opportunity. The three criteria should include assurance that its adoption will not harm the American worker. There's been enough of that. Secondly, assurance that we are not just exporting low environmental standards, by which I mean begin purchasing things from other nations that don't have the environmental standards we have and unilaterally disarming and disadvantaging ourselves because we're doing the right thing. And thirdly, assurances that will protect our sovereignty. We ought not to delegate or give up to any kind of a national, international body the right to set policy for America.
Thank you. Joyce, do you want me to read the question again?
Yes.
Okay, this person is very concerned about the effect of what they've heard about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. How can you work to protect our local environmental protections and local jobs?
Well, I believe that's exactly what Congress is meant to do. It should be one of their priorities, is to ensure that these trade agreements are not made that would affect, as I said before, our state and our local economy. So at the congressional level, I would be very clearly working on it, depending on which committee takes it up, but especially being from Washington State and so close to the Pacific. This is a more important issue possibly for Washington State than it would be for some others. So I would be following this very closely and making my views and your views known, and hopefully we would make sure that nothing passes Congress that would not be appropriate for the people of Washington State and the United States.
Okay, Joyce, you get to answer the next question first. What do you think about the proposal to delist the gray wolf from protection of the Endangered Species Act?
I wouldn't support that. I don't think that they have come back with enough population to encourage that kind of move at this time.
Denny?
I'll repeat what I said earlier. Science ought to dictate this. This ought not to be a political decision. It ought to be one based on science. And it just seems to me, frankly, that it shouldn't be that difficult to determine whether or not the base of that wolf population is sufficient for it to be enduring. You know, there are probably a lot of people in this room who at some point in their lives took their children or their grandchildren to Wolf Haven down in South County and sat by the campfire or the marshmallow pit there, fire pit, made marshmallows and listened to those wolves howl at night, like I had the privilege to do with my son, who is now 30 years old and sitting in the audience somewhere, and to see the look on their eye and see their faces when they listen to that almost magic sound. We ought not to do this if the science doesn't support it, period.
Okay, Denny, what do you intend to do about the high incarceration rate in the United States? 1 minute.
I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say, because that's a toughie.
Well, I think it's more than worrisome that America has the highest incarceration rate in the world, as I recall the last time I read it. This is a very expensive way to deal with problems in society. It's a very expensive way. It's a lot cheaper to invest on the front end of things and to provide, as an example, more Head Start funding and more preschool funding so that we can be a part of someone's lives when they need it most, to do what we can to assure that they do not get to that point, to have the strongest possible education system so that they can see for themselves a future of hope. The truth of the matter is there's probably nothing we could do more powerfully than to have a more robust economy. It was none other than the former Lion of the Senate, Teddy Kennedy, who once said, the strongest social program you can have, a good job available for people. And we don't have that right now. As we said earlier, we've been 30 years flatlining middle class wages. A healthier economy would solve a lot of these problems.
Joyce, would you like me to repeat the question?
No,
or?
that's fine.
Okay. 1 minute.
We worked on this for quite a few years at Pierce County, so it's a smaller issue at the local level. But we put in place other alternatives to incarceration and allowed evidence-based programs to come into the courts. We now have drug court, veterans courts, other things that we have brought together in the county so that we can put people into pathways that would provide for them rather than just put them in jail and throw away the key. We have done what we could to actually see these people become productive, healthy, helpful citizens. And as a former foster parent, I understand that some people have to play the hand that they're dealt. But we need to bring people alongside so that they can get the help and the encouragement and the modeling that they need to become productive citizens. So I know that these programs that work locally could be used at the state level and probably at, well, maybe not at the federal level, because at that point federal crimes are a different level. So that's what I would do, work with all.
Okay, thank you. So Joyce, I'm going to give you first run at the next question, and I'm going to warn you both, this next question is one that's important to me, so answer carefully. Okay, with all the funding priorities of the federal government, please explain how or if you would prioritize increased funding for the National Park Service. Joyce, you have 1 minute.
I'd love to. But when I go back to Washington, D.C., my priority will be getting on board with a plan that will reduce our federal debt so that we don't continue to burden our future generations. So I won't be going there to increase funding. I'll be going there to see if we can't find a way to maintain the good things that we have and to help them to be sustainable, while at the same time paying down that federal debt that we're increasing at $1 trillion every year. That is and should be the priority of every congressperson in DC.
Denny, would you want me to repeat the question?
No.
Okay, 1 minute.
The fact of the matter is you get to a point where the funding you're providing for some of these facilities and services is so low that it's going to end up costing you more over the long term. I doubt there's anybody sitting in this room that hasn't been to a national park, which have been degraded over the last several years, and in fact closed during the shutdown is but one example. The bigger threat here, frankly, is sequestration. As I have said often, sequestration is a really bad idea. Sequestration is when you cut across the budget in equal amounts without respect to what priorities should be, without respect to where you can save money. I mean, if your family household budget declines by 10%, do you cut your mortgage payment by 10%? Do you cut everything by equal amount? No, you make strategic decisions about what you can and should do. We are coming up to sequestration kicking in again in October of next year, and it will have devastating consequences for our economy and, frankly, for our national parks.
Thank you. Denny, you'll get this question first. If Shelton were to get 400 new immigrants who are meeting their family in Mason County, who should pay for the bilingual teachers and the load on schools and the community?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
If Shelton were to receive 400 new immigrants who are meeting their family in Mason County, who should pay for bilingual teachers and the load on schools and the community?
It is the paramount duty of the state to make ample provision for the education of all children residing within its borders without respect to caste, creed, or sex. I believe that's a verbatim quote from Article 9, Section 1 of our state constitution. It is our paramount duty. It is unequivocal. It is the state's obligation to provide for children attending our public schools. I entered the legislature in 1977. Literally, the fourth day of our session was the Doran decision, the original McCleary decision, and I spent the next many, many months chairing the Subcommittee on Basic Education in writing our state's first Basic Education Act, because I have a profound belief that education is the great equalizer in a democracy. It's frankly why the son of a truck driver and a telephone operator could grow up to have the kinds of opportunities I have had, and to be able to stand before you in all humility with the great honor to represent you. Education helped do that for me.
Okay, Joyce, do you want me to reread the question?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the state of Washington would have to pick up the bill for those children that go in, those 400 children that would go into Shelton School District. But this is just another example of why what the federal government has done, as it's continuously failed to do its job. And border states and governors, and maybe many more other states, if this happened in Shelton, would be struggling to pick up the pieces and to find the way to pay for the federal government's inability to enforce existing laws. From my perspective, this is something that should be picked up at the very least by the federal government, because it's a result of their bad decisions.
Thank you. So Joyce, the next question is about the cross-base highway. Mm-hmm. And I think we're all aware of what the cross-base highway is, so I'm summarizing the question here. I believe the question really comes down to there have been many reasons for not completing the cross-base highway. Where do you stand on this project, and what could you do to help secure federal matching dollars? And could you work with federal agencies to develop a realistic plan that they will work with?
I've supported the cross-base highway since its inception when I was back in the legislature. And it's a very important connection from East Pierce County all the way to the Thorn Lane exit or entrance onto I-5, and takes a load off of points farther north. Unfortunately, because of the other needs that we have, transportation needs, such as the problems and the congestion at JBLM and 167 and other highways in the state, the cross-base highway has dropped to a lower point on the priority list for Washington State. If the opportunity came up and the state did bring that up on its priority level, I would work very hard to make sure that that project was included in the list of federally matched projects.
Denny, do you want me to repeat the question? It's Cross Space Highway.
I've been pretty direct and blunt with people. My higher priorities are, number one, completion of State Road 167. And as I indicated earlier, I am a passionate advocate of that because I believe it's so important for our long-term economic development and the creation of good jobs, and a lot of good jobs, family wage jobs. I also think a higher priority would be to do something about the congestion in and around Joint Base Lewis-McChord on Interstate 5. I'm pretty sure everybody sitting in this room has had that delicious experience at one time or another. But what we need to remember is that that congestion, and arguably I-5 around JBLM is the most congested choke point on all of I-5 between Tijuana and Vancouver, BC. That cost us all money. It cost you time getting home to be with your family. It cost us all time because it takes longer to deliver goods. And it cost us all time because we're just sitting there burning gas and not doing what we need to. So those are the higher priorities. In an era of limited resources, that's where I'm going to put my effort.
Okay, next question. Denny, and I'm going to shorten this question. I'm going to make it short and sweet. Is our foreign policy moving in the right direction?
With respect to what?
It says, and if not, what should we change?
Is our foreign policy
Moving in the right direction, and if not, what should we change? That's the question.
We have a lot of foreign policies. And that's a pretty difficult question to answer if it's not connected to our activity in one region or another. Look, I think we live in a new world. We don't live in the world that I grew up in the 1950s or the 60s or the 70s, or even after the fall of the wall, in which we became and still are the only superpower on the face of the planet. Clearly, the effective way for America to lead in this current global circumstance is through example and through coalition building. We are no longer at a point where we can dictate to other people exactly what we want them to do. And I think what's happening in the Middle East is a perfect example. You know, at some point, instead of just talking about and answering questions about the military intervention, I hope we get to the point where we can have a conversation about what we can do to prevent the emergence of some of these radical and extremist organizations. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to play whack-a-mole over there, and that's not getting anybody ahead.
Joyce, do you want me to repeat the short question?
No, I think I'll pass on that one.
You're going to pass?
Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, I will give
Is that an option?
You know,
Yes.
this is America. It's freedom
Good
of speech.
job, Joyce. Thank you.
I didn't
Okay,
want to
so
repeat what you
this is
said.
not going to be, this
I
isn't
would've.
any easier. So Joyce, here you go. Do you think President Obama should ask for a declaration of war against the Islamic State? How would you vote and why?
Well, I think it's evident that the Islamic State has made a declaration of war against the United States and its citizens by beheading American citizens and other citizens of allies of the United States. I think it's definitely something that should be debated in Congress. It's not as simple as declaring war and then we run into a country and start bombing or putting troops on the ground. As all of you here know, war is a very serious matter, and people's lives, people we love, will put their lives on the line wherever they're sent. Our military are the best in the world. So I'm just not sure that this is the right time to make any sort of declaration of war. But when the time comes and we're serious about doing that, I believe that the president should go to the Congress, and with one voice, we should take care of the business that needs to be taken care of. Thank you.
Well, interestingly enough, America hasn't declared war on any other nation since World War II. Now think back to all of the armed conflicts we've been involved in over the last 70 years. Not once, save World War II, did we formally declare war. What's happening now in the Middle East is that the president is operating under the aegis of the Authorized Use for military force, AUMF as it is called, that was adopted by Congress in 2002, I believe. That's what he's using as his legal rationale and justification for the airstrikes he's currently engaged in, some of the other activity he's engaged in. What I do think is appropriate, and I think it's past due, is for Congress to at least try to take up another authorized use of military force to make it more reflective of our times. 12 years have passed. Should there be new conditions and or limitations, new instructions to the President and our armed services with respect to our involvement over there? I think it's the constitutional responsibility of the Congress to at least attempt that. I'm frankly, not terribly optimistic given how dysfunctional it is right now, but I do believe that you'll see an effort at it come the lame duck session between now and the end of the year.
Okay. Denny, what can be done to solve the riddle of the trust fund? And I'm assuming this is the highway trust fund that is about to go broke. Is there any plan to refinance the fund for future transportation options like rail expansion?
If anybody's got a better idea about how to fund the Federal Highway Trust Fund than we currently do, please submit it. I'm all ears. The fact of the matter is we're short of revenue. And the unpleasant and sometimes uncomfortable fact is, unless we're willing to deal with our revenue shortfall, then you're going to continue to see the roads and bridges of our nation decline in quality. It's going to end up costing us all the more. We are the single most trade-driven state in America. But trade is not just a function of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. It's also a function of our infrastructure in and around ports, like State Road 167, to beat a dead horse, which would do so much for our ability to compete with Prince Rupert up in Canada and with the third canal that's about to open that will be able to accommodate the Super Panamax ships. We've got to get serious about our investment in infrastructure, and in order to do that, we're going to need more revenue.
Joyce, 1 minute.
And it's my opinion that if we continue to use so much of the federal revenue paying debt service on all of the debt, the uncontrolled deficit spending that we have, then we will never have enough money to fund all the priority areas that we have. So it's very important that we very seriously look at paying down and have a plan, as the Republicans in Congress have, a plan for 10 years to pay down our federal debt so that that money can be used to fund bridges and roads and other priorities of the people. So I think that until we get that under control and we take it seriously and stop continuing to spend more than we bring in, we will just continue to exacerbate the problem that's in front of us.
Thank you. So I will make this the last question because I assume you two are getting a little
The lights are
tired.
hot.
So we'll make this the last one. I apologize to a member of the audience if we didn't get to your question. Here's last question, Joyce. Will you demand that the FCC keep Obama's promise on internet freedom, that the internet should be free and open and users should have the freedom to pick and choose what websites they visit or applications they use, and that content should be determined by consumer demand rather than a broadband provider's commercial interest?
Yes.
Okay, that was quick.
Do I get her unused time?
It doesn't work that way. You have 1 minute.
I think the President's moving in the right direction on this. I think what has occurred in our country with the rapid development of the internet and the unbelievable impact it's had on commerce has been, by and large, very positive, but not as positive as the final 27-17 score of the Seahawks defeating the football team in the other Washington.
And with that, I would very much like to thank our two candidates for joining the League of Women Voters of Thurston County and the Nisqually Indian Tribe tonight for this forum. And thank you all for being here and asking such great questions. It was terrific.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, one last thing. I encourage all of you to really consider joining us at the League of Women Voters. We could certainly use more members, and we would love to have you, and you can help us put on programs like these. So thank you again, and thank you for joining us.